This is section 8.3 of Algebra 2. It's all about polynomial division. Now, it may seem like this has nothing to do with the first two sections, and it actually does. It's just that we're not going to go into depth of everything that we can use this for, but you do need to be exposed to division because this is, it can be a standardized test concept. So first of all, let's dig deep, go back to like 4th or 5th grade when you first learned how to do long division, right? If I have to divide this out without using a calculator, remember you put the 21 on the outside, and then you put your 4, 8, 5, 7 on the inside. And when you start dividing, excuse me, you're asking yourself, how many times does 21 go into 48? And so we would start by saying 2 times. And then if you multiply 2 times 21, you're going to get 42. And then remember, you draw your line and you subtract, right? So 48 minus 42 is 6. And then we start all over again. Remember, you bring down the next number, so bring down a 5. And then 21 times something equals 65. Let's see, I think that's going to be 3. And so if you multiply 3 times 21, that's going to be 63. Then you subtract, and we're going to get 2, and then bring down the last number, so bring down the 7. 21 goes into 27 only one time. That's 21. Draw your line, subtract, and when I subtract, I'm going to get 6. And since there's nothing else to bring down, then the remainder, what's left over, is 6. And maybe when you first learned division, you might have just said R6, right, for remainder 6. But a little bit later, you talked about how the best way to write your answer is to say the answer is 231, and then your remainder goes over what you divided by. So 231 and 6 over 21. So that was the way we learned it with numbers. Well, what if it's polynomials? Well, you actually follow the same pattern. It just seems a little more involved. So whatever you're dividing by is what goes out in front. So I'm going to put the x minus 4 out in front. And then the rest of it goes on the inside. So 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 18x minus 8. Okay, so even though you don't see it, there's like this implied 1 right here. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, how many times will x go into x cubed? In other words, x times what gives me x cubed? Well, what would I multiply x by to get 2x cubed? I would have to multiply by 2x squared, wouldn't I? But when you multiply now, I'm going to take that 2x squared, I'm going to multiply it by this entire thing. It's going to give me 2x cubed, and then 2x squared times negative 4 would be negative 8x squared. Okay, and just like on the division with the numbers, you draw your line, and you're going to subtract, but you have to keep in mind you're subtracting this entire thing. So the best way to show that you're subtracting the whole thing is to think about distributing the negative. So really it's going to be a minus 2x cubed, and if you distribute the negative, won't this become a plus 8x squared? So 2x cubed minus 2x cubed cancels, and by the way, that should always happen or you've done something wrong. And then negative 3x squared and positive 8x squared is going to be positive 5x squared. Okay, and so now I'm to the point where I have to bring down the next number. So I'm going to bring down the minus 18x, and then I start all over again. So what can I multiply x by to get 5x squared? Well, I would multiply by a positive 5x. Okay, so now I multiply 5x times the x minus 4, so that's going to be 5x squared minus 20x. And so again, I'm going to draw my line, and so I'm subtracting that whole thing. So that means when I distribute, it's going to be a minus 5x squared, and when you distribute your minus, this is going to become a plus. So like I said a minute ago, these should always cancel. Negative 18 and positive 20 is going to leave me with a positive 2x. Bring down the last term, the minus 8. And then one more time, what do I multiply x by to get 2x? Well, I just multiply by positive 2. And so when I multiply that 2 by x minus 4, I'm going to get 2x minus 8, and then one last subtraction. But again, you're subtracting the whole thing, so it's going to become a negative 2x and a positive 8. And do you see that the 2x's cancel? Negative 8 and positive 8 is 0. So in this situation, the remainder is 0. In other words, it worked out nice and neat. So your solution has no remainders. Your solution is simply that 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. Okay? So let's do one more. So remember, I'm dividing by whatever's on the bottom. So if I'm dividing by 2x squared minus 2, and then the top partial goes on the inside. And notice my warning, it says watch out for missing terms. So this starts with a 2x to the 5th, but do you see there is no x to the 4th term? So I'm going to leave kind of a little space here. It's kind of like saying I have a 0x to the 4th, and then I have my 2x cubed, and then I have my minus 6x squared. And notice there's no x term, so it's kind of like saying I have a 0x, and then it ends with the plus 1. So you have to kind of take into account those missing terms just in case. All right, so here we go. What do I multiply 2x squared by to get 2x to the 5th? Well, I would just multiply by x cubed. So when I multiply it by this whole thing, I'm going to have 2x to the 5th minus 2x cubed. And for my minus 2x cubed, I want to be sure and line it up with the x cubed that's on the top. So in this case, I didn't have to worry about x to the 4th. All right, so we're going to subtract the whole thing. So if I distribute that minus, this is going to become a plus. Those cancel. I don't need to bring down the x to the 4th because it says there are 0 of them. Over here, 2x cubed and 2x cubed gives me 4x cubed. So now I bring down my next term, bring down the minus 6x squared. Okay, we start all over again. What do I multiply 2x squared by to get 4x cubed? Well, it's going to be a positive 2x. So when I multiply that by the entire parenthesis, I'm going to have 4x cubed. And then I'm going to have a minus 4x. Now, I'm not going to put it here under the x squared. I'm going to put it right here under the 0x. Do you see how I put it right there under that 0x? So when you do your subtraction, okay, I'm subtracting the whole thing, so that's like a minus. That means this is going to become a plus. So when I do my subtraction, yes, the x cubes cancel, but negative 6x squared and nothing added to it would just bring down a negative 6x squared. And then 0x and 4x is 4x. Okay, back to the drawing board one more time. What do I multiply 2x squared by to get 6x squared? Well, I'm going to multiply by negative 3. So I'm going to have negative 6x squared. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. But again, I'm not going to put my positive 6 under the 4x because it's not like terms. I'm going to put it underneath this 1. So this is my positive 6. Draw my line. And then when I do my subtraction, so keep in mind, I'm distributing, so this is going to become a plus, this is going to become a minus. So the x squareds, the 6x squareds cancel. The 4x, nothing added or subtracted, so just bring it down as a 4x. I have a positive 1 and a negative 6 gives me a negative 5. And since I've used all of my numbers, I've even used that 1, that's how I know I'm done. Even though there's just extra stuff here, I know I'm done because I've used all the numbers. So all of this is the remainder. So I'm going to say my solution is x cubed plus 2x minus 3. But we're not in 5th grade anymore. We don't write r for remainder. We write our remainder as a fraction. So I'm going to say plus, the fraction is going to be the remainder, 4x minus 5, over whatever you divided by, 2x squared minus 2. So this is the way you would write your solution for long division. Okay, now it is possible to do a shortcut on some of them. The shortcut is called synthetic division. But you can only use this shortcut instead of long division when you're dividing by a linear factor, right? Linear meaning x plus or minus something. So it might be an x minus 4, it might be an x plus 2, it might be an x plus 1. If that's all there is to what you're dividing by, you can do this shortcut. Notice on this previous example, we were dividing by 2x squared. That's not a linear factor because it has a square in it. Okay, so in order to do synthetic division, you don't have to write out all the x's. So if you're dividing by x minus 4, you put the opposite of that number. So you would put a 4 on the outside. Okay, I tend to do this just to show that it's on the outside. And then you list out just the coefficients, not the x's. So my first term was a 2x cubed. Then I had a negative 3x squared. Then a negative 18x. And then a minus 8. So notice for synthetic division, you don't use any x's. Okay, so you leave a little space and you draw a line. I know it looks strange, but once you see the shortcut a couple times, you're going to see how easy it is to use. All right, in order to get started on your synthetic division, you just automatically bring that first number down, 2. And for whatever reason, that's the part that people tend to forget, and it just throws them all off. Okay, once you bring that number down, you multiply the outside number by whatever that number is. So 4 times 2 is 8, and you put that right here. So when you're looking at the 4 over here, you multiply. Okay, but then these numbers are lined up, you add them. So as you're going vertical right here, you add. So 8 and negative 3 is 5. Okay, now I start over again with so I multiply 4 times 5, and I get 20. And then remember, when you go vertical, you add. Negative 18 and 20 is positive 2. Okay, one more time. So I'm multiplying. 4 times 2 is 8. And then you add vertically. Negative 8 and positive 8 is 0. Well, that last number is always your remainder. So if the remainder is 0, that means it worked out nice and neat. Now you might say, does that mean your answer is 252? No. Remember, the answer to these, when there's x's, the answer has x's in them. Well, this answer has the x's, they're just not written down. So since this started with an x cubed, that's how I know my answer is going to start with 1 less than that. So my answer starts with an x squared. And so this 2 tells me I have a 2x squared. And then you work your way down. Plus, this is a 5, so plus 5x. And then plus 2. So this is my solution. Okay, I know when you first see it, it's kind of overwhelming, but let's do another one to show you that these really are nice and neat. All right, so I'm dividing by x plus 2, so I put a negative 2 on the outside. And then on the top, I have 2x to the 5th. Now, again, notice you have missing terms. There are no x to the 4th, no x to the 3rd, no x squared, no x, and then I end with positive 3. So any missing exponents, you have to put zeros in, all right? So you always start by bringing that first number down. All right, then you multiply. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And then remember, you add vertically, so negative 4. And then you multiply. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. And then you add, multiply. 8 times negative 2. And then you add, multiply. Negative 2 times negative 16. And then you add. Negative 2 times 32 is negative 64. Then you add vertically, and I end with negative 61. So remember, that last number is your remainder. So my answer is going to start with 2. And then because this started with an x to the 5th, that means my answer starts with an x to the 4th, and I just work my way down. So it's going to be minus 4x cubed plus 8x squared minus 16x plus 32, and then remember how we write remainders. We would say minus 61 over whatever you're dividing by, and I was dividing by x plus 2. So this is the solution. Okay, so that's just a little taste of long division and synthetic division.